from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased joining me, and I'm excited when I have someone from our region joining me. So I have the Chief Operating Officer for DSquares, Khaled Nazif. Khaled, as I was telling you just now before we start the recording, I don't like to spend much time on behalf of my guests to speak because I like to hear, the intro from them. So without further ado, first of all, thank you for joining me here today. Tell us a little more about you, your journey, and what brought you to DSquares. And then we're gonna discuss a lot of things with you today regarding DSquares, about loyalty here in the region and what you're doing with DSquares, and of course some stories from both Silicon Valley and MENA region. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mehmet. It's a pleasure to be on the CTO show. I've been an avid follower and love the opportunity. So thanks again to join in. So as you mentioned, I am the COO at DSquares. My name is Khaled Nazif. And I did DSquares. A quick intro is one of the leading white labeled loyalty solutions provider in the MENA region. And I've joined DSquares around 5 years now, which means I'm not one of the original co-founders because DSquares turns 13 years today. But I did join to replace one of the co-founders, and I can shed some more light on that later on. But prior to these 5 years, I spent the previous 8 years in Palo Alto, California. So living the whole kind of Silicon Valley dream, where I kicked it off with a 2-year MBA at Stanford, and got bit by the startup bug there, and launched my own B2B SaaS startup from there, which aimed to revolutionize the contact center industry. That later on, after a few years, a good run, later on led me to Zendesk, which at the time was one of the leading customer support software providers. So you can see I'm kind of a CX aficionado at heart. I'm an engineer by training, so you'd like that as well. But that's my story of how I ended up after a good 4 years at Zendesk. The decision was to return to Egypt, where I was brought up and where I did my undergrad. And DSquares was the perfect landing spot for that return, for sure.
Great. And thank you again, Khaled, for making it today. I know how busy it can be, especially for someone in your position. Let's start discussing a little bit, because I'm going to return about, the founders' stories and, the scaling. But let's talk about DSquares, right? So
yeah,
DSquares, as you mentioned, like 13 years old company. And, when you joined, I think the focus was mainly on it was an Egyptian company, but now it has a massive market, and this is a massive leap, right? So what were the first, I would say, few things you focused on when you joined to make that expansion possible?
Definitely. Let me give a bit of background on how we spent these kind of the 8 years before I joined.
Sure.
I like to always call DSquares sort of as the best kept secret in the MENA region, or at least in the startup ecosystem in the MENA region. For that reason you mentioned, a huge success that was gained or done in Egypt by gaining more than 85% of the market share, so pure domination there. But then it was the time to scale this success beyond borders and take it and replicate this success within the region. And we did that over the past couple of years with offices in more than 8 countries in the region, serving more than 16 countries, and serving some of the largest of enterprises in the countries where we have presence. Now, the reason I call it the best kept secret, because DSquares is a white labeled loyalty solutions provider. So I always challenge people, even when talking to a wide audience, by telling them like who here has heard of DSquares, and you see only a few hands kind of raising up. But I challenge them by the fact that most probably everyone in the room has used DSquares or have used DSquares in one way or another without them even knowing it. Because we do power the loyalty solutions of, again, most of the telcos and banks, oil and gas companies, like consumer and the B2B in the region. We've also kind of scaled this to the largest type of enterprise in the countries we serve, which is, as some people might forget, is the government. So we do government loyalty-based solutions, and a lot of people find this intriguing because, like, how are you doing loyalty with government? And I can shed a lot more about that. But that's sort of how we've scaled the business past the original success within Egypt. Today, these large enterprise programs, they're around 70 programs. So a lot of people might think, oh, that's it, 70 programs. Yeah, but one program, I always clarify that one program is the equivalent of, thousands of SME clients or a Zendesk client, as I used to sell them. And so the real signifier of how large this platform is that the end users are now exceeding around 150 million end users, and the transactions is exceeding 2.5 billion transactions. And so that's the real signifier of the amount of loyalty we create with our large partners. So that's the background. That's DSquares, sort of how it became and how we've grown. But a lot could be said on how the original 8 years were done, and then how we've kind of scaled beyond that. So would you like me to share some more on some of the founding stories?
I will come to the founding story, but you mentioned something which also, it's a kind of a question I prepared, but I thought now it's the time to ask it. You mentioned like some, like intriguing thing, like, okay, government doing loyalty programs. So, this is massive, like 150 million end customers and thousands and 10,000s of merchants. What do you think people outside this industry still misunderstand about customer engagement? Like, why do you think there's still this surprise? Because I'm not sure if I can say this, because here, at least, the UAE started this, and I know like other governments are following now when it comes to, like to this customer experience. So Dubai is leading as government, of course, in this. But why do you think there is still this misconception, or what are like some of other misconceptions you hear from people about this industry, Khaled?
The misconception is that, and you said it right, like the UAE is definitely a leader in that space, especially when it comes to government. But a lot of others are still treating the relationship between, and I'll use the terminology here that the government might use, so between the government entity and the citizen as a transactional relationship. And so something that, a citizen requires a service, and the government will do that service as a transaction. There is you wouldn't see the same customer engagement that you would see at some of the retail chains or telcos or even banks. It's just a pure transactional relationship. And unfortunately, you see a lot of that not only in government, but we actually see a lot of that in consumer-facing, retail or enterprises. And that's basically what we're trying to change, or to change the mentality of, is that it's no longer a transactional relationship. It's an engagement relationship. So even with government, we called it a citizen engagement program. where you use loyalty, yes, which is something inherently seen as a transactional thing. You earn and you earn points and you spend them again and so on. But actually, you use loyalty to kind of influence the behavior of the consumer. In that case, the citizen. If you want the citizen to incentivize them to do a certain behavior or action, you can provide the sort of gamify the experience and provide loyalty as the incentive here, as opposed to just pure transactional. Buy something and you earn this, and then you go and spend it again, and so on and so forth. Now, and that's on the government. With retailers and others, the way we're taking it beyond transactions as well is that we're definitely working with a lot of data technologies, and we can talk a bit more about that. But we're using that to create a personalized experience. And I know that's by now that's commoditized. Everyone is providing personalized experiences, but it really comes into effect with loyalty, where you don't give a sort of a one box serves all to all your end users. I want to stretch Mehmet to a certain goal or to a certain. Your incentive will be quite different than my incentive. Will be quite different than the third person. And so we're creating these sort of unified personas, thanks to the massive data that I've told you about. And according, we are able to stretch the goals, so personalize even the goals or the challenges that we are using to, again, influence your behavior, whatever that behavior is. Obviously, with retailers or with consumer-facing platforms, it's increase in spend or increase in frequency of visit and so on. But it could be something completely different with different industries and different clients. And so that's the main differentiator that's happening today.
Yeah, just as a follow up on this, because what you mentioned about the different, I would call them techniques, right? So it's not only the technology; they are like the techniques that you're seeing now playing in this sector. So you mentioned like gamification, you mentioned data. I'm sure AI, plays a big role also here. But do you think there's still something which we can say it's, if I want to use the right word, like fundamentally broken about how companies try to approach the loyalty today? Like, is it like still they have an old mentality, if that makes sense? And you're trying to bring them to your point, like because they want to achieve something. Uh, I always give the example. So when you take a customer from point A to point B, so sometimes the point B, it's so faster, better, to an extent that for some people, like, oh, like this is too much for me, right? So, and they have this kind of a flu vision. Do you think, with all the thing that you just mentioned, in addition to the AI, this is changing a little bit the landscape of how companies fundamentally look at loyalty in general?
Definitely, and I would say we're a bit lagging in the region in realizing or making that realization. But DSquares has been benefiting from creating that awareness. There are certain sectors that have the awareness that loyalty is no longer, and that's the number one sort of barrier or misconception. Loyalty is no longer a cost center, right? A lot of people, few view loyalty as a cost center, and that's a big, a deal breaker from the get-go. That's from the very start of launching a program. There are specific sectors and specific countries, I would say. So I would say it's a cultural thing where you would see that, loyalty is still treated as this transactional thing that you need to minimize its cost as much as possible. You need to do it just to be, keeping par with the market, but it's a cost center, and so you're not investing in the right way to kind of gamify it, as we mentioned, or to personalize it, or to stretch a consumer's behavior and so on. While there are other countries, and Egypt has proven, so has Saudi, for example. Obviously, Dubai or the UAE is quite advanced in that sector. But they have proven that we've went beyond the concept of loyalty as a cost center, and we're now treating it as a revenue driver, for sure. And so let's see how we differentiate in that sense. Some people are choosing the challenges route and stretching people beyond their sort of, or having the sort of the incentive personalized in order to stretch their spend or frequency of visit and so on, the typical metrics that a loyalty marketer would look at. But others are using it as sort of, it's no longer this direct route. It's I'll create advocates who will become referrals and who will help me with acquisition, and will improve my net promoter score and create promoters and advocates and so on. So there are different tactics, and you still see in the region, we're in the Middle East and Africa, that there are the discrepancies, and we see it all. We have offices and clients in Kenya and Tanzania that are treating loyalty as a currency, basically.
Mhm.
So that's beautiful in terms of transactions, but again, very transactional. And there are, as I mentioned, country or customers that are treating loyalty as the main revenue driver. It has become so core into the business that it's front and center. It's something that we review and takes and gets the attention of their chief revenue officer and so on, because they've seen and they've tasted sort of the impact that it does on their top line. So not only on their bottom line or on their retention, definitely on the acquisition and on growing their revenue. So that's the beauty of the region where we're at. You get to this diversity and you get the potential as well. You've seen what could be, and you're trying to bring in a lot of the customers and sectors to catch up, basically.
Absolutely. Khaled, you wanted to tell me about the original story a little bit. And so of course, like you joined DSquares, it was like already established. So
Yes.
for you, I'm sure you had your own point of view, both as an operator and as a founder coming from Silicon Valley. Tell me about that phase, like maybe something which would benefit a founder who's listening to us also.
True. And a lot of people actually, call me up who are thinking of returning to the region, whether they're founding somewhere in the West, in Europe or in the States. And, you always get that itch of, I want to return to the region. I can have more of an impact. I have a strong network there. Why not utilize it? But there are always the buts, right? And in my case, a lot of people would warn me and tell me, hey, you've been away for quite so many years. You find the work ethic might have changed, or you're no longer accustomed to the sort of the hustling and bustling of an emerging economy like Egypt and the entire region. And I just, took the jump. My main advice to everyone is just, close your nose and take that jump in. And quite frankly, DSquares was the perfect landing spot, again, as I mentioned, due to so many factors that I do not see and did not see in so many other startups or scale-ups, is the term I like to use on DSquares now. The thing is, you looked at the founding team, and I appreciated that the most. When they started DSquares, they made sure that they maintained, through bootstrapping, they maintained it to be cash flow positive from day one. So it didn't have the typical startup route where you raise millions and millions of dollars in funding and you kind of burn that through a ridiculous burn rate, and you raise again because you're achieving some good metrics from a VC perspective, and you kind of raise again and again, and you accordingly you scale with that notion. DSquares has never raised such a round and have kept it bootstrapped from day one, from client one to this day, and the success where it continues to be profitable and positive and growing. Now, some people might argue now that prolonged the scale or the growth. And in practice, and what I saw is that sort of time was needed for the product itself to mature as well. So it gave opportunity for the product to mature in order for it to scale to the situation where we're at today. So definitely what was sold and deployed 13 years ago at one of our flagship clients is no longer nowhere near what is deployed there today. So much maturity has happened. And that time was well spent and well gained, well made use of. And so that's something that you don't see a lot of. I loved that the founders were adamant about it, and we've kept it that way, and we continued with that. The other piece is that they are risk takers. A lot of people boast Silicon Valley, like what the Silicon Valley culture is what they call it. It's all about, it has a risk-taking culture, and it has a kind of give back culture, which is what I admired the most over there. And I found that here at DSquares, where they weren't shy of taking risks still, even with the bootstrapping, where you would find a client that asks you, hey, there's an opportunity, there's an RFP in a new country where we have zero presence in, we might not be ready yet, not that mature, as I mentioned, in the early years, but they took the leap. They submitted the RFP, they won the RFP, hired a new team, established a new office in a new country. And to this day, that was 10 years ago, this client's still with us and obviously became an anchor for many, many more clients in that specific country. And so these sort of stories and anecdotes you no longer see in sort of the romanticized startup story. That's in the region, but also worldwide. So I loved that story. The other piece that I loved as well, and you don't see it more that often, is so as I mentioned, I came in as COO to replace one of the original co-founders, and that's not an easy thing to do. And the person who's Ayman Aisawi, who's a dear friend, he's the one who kind of poached me from Silicon Valley and encouraged me for my return to replace him. So for you to realize and acknowledge that, hey, I'm a builder, and that's what he acknowledges, right? He likes to build stuff from scratch. DSquares has reached a phase where it needs to scale, and not just building, but needs to scale. And I'm gonna hire someone or get someone to replace me with full authority and full position as a sort of a late partner or late founder to take my place. Obviously, Ayman went out to spin out another sister company in the fintech space, and it's working well for DSquares and for Lucky, which is our sister company. But that story on its own, for someone to be able to know what's best for the company and bring in someone, a new caliber or a new kind of set of eyes for the new phase, that's something that that I have a lot of respect for sure. And then lastly, you see Marwan, who's my partner and the CEO. You see the passion, and that's one last thing that is common to a lot of entrepreneurs. But you see the passion in his eyes as he speaks to clients today. It's as if he's speaking to that very first client 13 years ago. He really loves what he does when talking to clients, when he talks about loyalty, and so that's the kind of gives us all the fire under our belly. So these were all factors. I know they all kind of revolve around the founding team and the extended team, to be honest, but that was the most important piece. So as I circle back to those that kind of warned me about the work ethic and, me, doing a 180 and returning back to the States, I told them, no, actually one of the main things and main factors that are keeping me happy and satisfied and having that sense of impact is the team that I get to work with at DSquares and the impact we're doing together in growing DSquares to scale in the region. So that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So by the way, like this story is is impressive, and it's rare. Let me be frank with you, Khalid. It's very rare.
Yeah,
And like, it's not like because I want to judge the region or the founders in the regions, but and this is something I'm sure like you heard it also in Silicon Valley. Um, like, sometimes the question they ask any founder, can you imagine yourself doing the same thing after 10 years, 15 years? And like, you just described it, right? When you said like Marwan goes and he pitched to customers the same way he was doing it, like when he pitched for the first customer, like, of course, like, if you ask someone today, would you be able to do the same thing in 10 years? Probably they will tell you yes, but the proof comes with time. So, but it's very rare, I
yeah,
would say. Maybe some people they will agree, some people will disagree, but it's when they tell you, and this is a term, I'm sure you agree with me, it's like it's a Silicon Valley term, like you have skin in the game. So this is what they call skin in the game. Like you have enough resilience, you have enough passion to what you want to achieve. You love what you do. So like you're ready to keep doing what you're doing whatever happens. And like it's a big success of having the company fully bootstrapped in a very tough market as ours, I would say. Especially I'm thinking like 13 years ago. Of course now it's getting easier, kind
yeah,
of, but
yeah.
it's a big, it's a big achievement, and that's inspiration, I would say, for other entrepreneurs in the region. Now, saying that, I know, when I was, going through the some of the information the team shared with me before I do the recording with you. So you
Yeah.
describe yourself, as that someone who did a shift from, pirate hat to navy hat.
Yeah.
So how does this look like, and how does this applies to the shift that you also did, moving back to the region and joining these squares?
No, perfect. So I actually used that quote. I think Reid Hoffman is originally the one who used it, and he used it in the book called Blitz Scaling, which is perfect for that. I totally recommend it for anyone in that phase where DSquares is and continue or was and continues to be, which is that scale up phase. And that was the perfect timing where I joined in, as I mentioned. It was a time where DSquares kind of needs to let go of the hustling hat and just to go get there, and that's very important for a startup for sure. But once you have that the number of enterprises, and you need to maintain a sort of enterprise grade quality, and you have that sort of scale that's multicultural, multi regional, you need to put in certain processes. Um, uh, Hopefully not as bureaucratic as it would be in a navy or something, but it would be with the same quality and level of consistency. And that's what sort of I came in with as I started. The first thing, and it touched everything. So the first and most important was the people, right? We needed to be sort of encapsulate the DSquares culture. And so we worked a lot. We did a lot of investment in the people and culture side. I've noticed one of your recent episodes talked about OKRs and implementing those within different sizes or different companies. And that's something we've quickly adopted and implemented, and was necessary to make sure that the scale or the number of employees are still following the same goal and objective and mission and vision that was set early on. And I don't want to get too sophisticated or too philosophical, sorry about that, but there is a
Great.
number that I like to I've read a lot about, and it's the 150 number.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mentioned in the book Sapiens and many other research, but it talks about how that 150 number is, if you exceed it, you can no longer kind of scale a tribe. That was the maximum that a tribe back in the sort of
Mm-hmm.
caveman or Neanderthal days, you would never be able to exceed a 150 number. Then you would lose the direct relationships. And that's about the time where I joined in as well. We kind of started approaching the 150 number. We've far exceeded that today. But as we approached that number and exceeded it, we started to lose the entire one-to-one relationships between CEO and the most recent hire and so on. And so we needed to have other processes to make sure that we're maintaining the culture, maintaining the objectives. Everyone's working as if it's one ship, one goal. And so that's something that we needed to keep in mind. Well, I'd advise everyone to be wary of the 150 number and that scale of employees. But we've exceeded that successfully so far and continue to grow. The other piece that this kind of putting in some or scaling affected was on the product side. As you can imagine, again, we had the hustling hat. We have one client here that demanded something, we customized for them. Another client, we customized it for them, and so on and so forth. But then we needed to have products that scale, and we started a productization project or initiative. I would call it a project, and that initiative, got into everything that we do. Today, we have sort of ready-made, off-the-shelf products that are customizable still, obviously, but at least we have 80% of the work done thanks to the years of development that we're now able to encapsulate in a productized or modularized format. So that was another thing that we made sure we focus on, and one of the things that I was adamant in building was the product team, which was non-existent. We were kind of, again, a delivery. We made the shifts from a sort of a delivery company to a product-led company, and that has helped us a lot as well.
I'm happy you mentioned about two things. So first, the magical number. I was looking for it, and of course, in the book I read about it. But always I was wondering. I know it's like 150. It's like not necessarily exactly 150. It could be like 120. It could be 170.
Yeah.
But I made sure when I interviewed on the podcast any founder who was able to scale, I would say, beyond certain number of employees, like when they felt, like I'm not now seeing, for example, the new hire people, I'm not, for example, anymore in touch with every single one that I used to do. And this number always, like, it's between 120, sometimes 200 if they are really good. Because, some people, Khaled, I noticed, they have an ability, they have a talent of, for example, memorizing names, memorizing even like small details, up to certain number. But of course, even if you are like a Superman, I would say in memorizing people names and remembering about their lives and so on. So you reach a phase you can't. And of course, like, it's not only about the people. You have like company to run, you have revenue to bring to the company, you have investors, of course, if you like just fundraise and you have some other like duties. I mean, you have other things in your mind. So you'll not be able, not because you are not good, it's because this is the human capacity. Like you can't do more. And
Exactly.
what happens usually, and but I think it's not 150 here. Here it depends also how strong they implemented it, which I'm talking here about the culture of the company, right? Because I was always kind of, I'm not philosophical also, but was wondering why, and we saw this in multiple books, like every single business book I've read, we see like always innovation comes from startup, right? And then, or spin-offs, right? And then, these companies, they grow, and they become, I call them dinosaurs, right? And it's not like to say something bad about them, but like the similarity is like a dinosaur moves slow. So the big companies move slow. And again, the culture kind of fade because maybe the original founders are not there. Now, from your experience, both, in Silicon Valley and, now growing DSquares, the culture, in my opinion, is underrated still in our region. It's my, again, it's a personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. And by the way, it's underrated even in Silicon Valley sometimes. So we see that the culture fade after certain amount. Is it the same 150 in your opinion, or is it something else? When I talk about culture, I mean, and I'm not talking about like going out on Friday night doing a barbecue or like being friendly and having the ping pong in the office. I'm talking about, like really when everyone joins the company, they feel they belong there and they feel this is their place. I've noticed like after some, I don't know the number, but after some while, this fades because the companies start to become, it's not even a scale up anymore. It's like a full-fledged company. So what's your opinion about that?
Now, I think there are a lot of companies that were able to maintain the culture beyond, when they become a full-fledged company, as you mentioned. I've seen that in Silicon Valley for sure. I was lucky to be at Zendesk in the glory years, where I would argue that it was one of many companies that are called the best places to work. But they truly embraced a Silicon Valley culture, and that reflected on how people did a lot of the work at Zendesk at the time. And so that kind of influenced me as I again landed here in DSquares. And the 150 number is when you start kind of losing the inherent culture. Let's put it that way. It's you can argue that there wasn't even a people and culture team, but everyone still had that same culture because they were, drinking straight from the fountain. They're meeting with the CEO. They're building everything together from scratch. And so it was still transcending to everyone, even if informally. But beyond that point is where we needed to make sure that it is formally captured. The DSquares identity is being formulated, and people are aware of it, and all our people and culture goals and objectives are serving it, that DSquares identity that we want to create. A lot of the times, as I speak to Remy Hadjou, our PNC director, and I always say I want people, when they see a DSquarean or a DSquares employee from afar, they would know that they are a DSquares employee, just because of the traits that they are showing, the demeanor, the way they do their work, and so on. So, and I've seen that in very large companies, and so in some of the largest as well. And I'm happy to name, ExxonMobil, who's a very good partner of DSquares and a client, an award-winning client as well. I'm always in awe in seeing, the ExxonMobil employees as we deal with them. They all sort of have the same foundation, no matter what, no matter how diverse they are. It's someone that might be in a department completely different age group, different genders, different everything, but they're all sharing the same mentality, the same foundations. And you would sense it as a partner, even as an outsider, a close outsider, but it's someone that this is definitely something that's consistent, and they must be doing something right in maintaining that consistency throughout. And so my conclusion or my suggestion is that we really hammer on internal comms. We really work on OKRs again. These are the tools that we use today to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Everything is consistent. Everyone is sharing the same goal, and it's transcending all the way to the most junior of levels. And so that's our solution for it. So there is hope for the region and for all sizes as well, for sure. It does take.
Yeah, of course. Like things, great things takes time. This is my my theory always. And I want to ask you something related to the ecosystem, because we repeated it, about MENA region, startups ecosystem, and scale ups, of course, as well, versus Silicon Valley. Now, I follow both very closely myself, out of passion. First of all, like I'm also an engineer by trade, so any new thing will attract my attention. Um, when we have the conversation, about any ecosystem, we understand like nuances, right? So nothing can become a Silicon Valley, nothing can become a Riyadh, nothing can become Cairo, nothing can become Dubai, because each one of these ecosystem has some uniqueness. But I believe there are few things that we can adapt and bring, which if we blend it with our cultural slash, if you want to call it local slash I don't know, unique traits, we can come up with something good. So as someone who've been in Silicon Valley, first of all, let's start from here. Like, compared to when you left and then you came back, how much, difference have you seen in the ecosystem? Second, what do you think what still we are missing, I'm not saying to become Silicon Valley, don't get me wrong. And there's nothing that can become something, but at least to really establish ourselves as one of the main ecosystems globally.
True, true. The first differentiator or the main difference I saw when I left, I recall there was one VC in a country like Egypt, and I'm sure the same would be, very few VCs in the entire region to start with, like a few well-known names. And in Egypt, it was Algebra Ventures at the time. It was called the Idea Developers even before that, and in the 8 years gap or the good experience in Silicon Valley as I returned, this is like the access to VC is far more than it used to be, and I think that is because there is a bit more of a risk accepting culture. A lot of people are seeing the benefits that can come from the startup ecosystem, and so it is happening. Now, a lot of people might disagree and saying, but it's not even enough still. Like, it's access to VC, it's not enough. There is far more pipeline of startups, and we're not seeing enough funding coming into the region and so on. But I would argue that this is nothing compared to even 10 years before. So we're there. But and so that's the main difference. Ironically, the one thing that I think we can do more of is actually accepting failures. So the whole point behind having a risk-taking culture is you accept the failure when it happens. It's not take a risk and celebrate the successes, but then failures are, completely bombarded, like they're.
Yeah, it's like as a catastrophe happened.
Yeah, a catastrophe. In Silicon Valley, failures are celebrated to an annoying extent. Like I said, so this is something that we really need to learn about, and it actually applies not only in startups but also in scale-ups and even in internally
companies.
Within companies. It's okay you need to have to embrace that culture that it's okay to try, and that's the risk-taking part. It's okay to fail and actually use that failure and post it and shout out about it and have others learn from it. Make sure that you learn from it, but that definitely is something that I do not see a lot of today, and it really is a cultural thing to start with, but also it does have some leadership aspect, whether within a company or again whether from the wider culture or the wider ecosystem. Sorry, where you really need to be more accepting of, again, failures, mistakes, celebrate them even to an extent, at least in the beginning, and that will create, it's fine. Let me try and let me fail and try again and boast about it and talk about it and have others learn from it and so on. So it's that's one of the main things that I loved over there, and I'd love to see much more in the region about. We are definitely celebrating the successes, but we need to celebrate the failures as well.
Right. Just one point to add to what you said, Khaled. Of course, I remember when I was telling you at the beginning, like I was like passionate about startups, and I like startups, right? So following the stories, and I barely remember, when I was mentioning the word even startup, right? Just the word startup in this part of the world. I'm talking like 2003, 2004, even before I came to the UAE, and people were laughing at me. And I was saying, like, and then, I came to the UAE 2005, and by that year, I remember, Souk.com was one of the, newcomers. And then, actually there was before in Jordan Maktoub. And then people, they start to hear, Yahoo acquired Maktoub. And then, like, of course, later on, Amazon acquired Souk.com. And then people, they thought, oh, like, we remember you, like you mentioned like 10 years ago, like about the startup thing. It looks cool. I said, yeah. But because, like these guys, I'm sure like they failed a lot. And, I say all the time, the early people here in the region who did this, of course, I don't know them personally, but I think in my point of view, they are heroes because, they are the real risk takers at that time. They are the pioneers who started this. And I remember, when I was trying to find, believe it or not, like I knew about like the accelerators in the US and so on. And I was telling people here, hey, like, do we have anything like this here? And they were, forget about VC, like people, they don't know what an accelerator is, like incubator and all these things. And then I said, okay, we don't have that. And then, all of a sudden, and I think this, good things happened when, first I think it was Souq.com, the big one, acquired by Amazon. So it opened the eyes of the people. Oh, like startups can have good exits. And then Kareem with Uber. And then, like everything happened. And I think Egypt is one of the countries, if I'm not mistaken, like from ecosystem perspective, it's one of the most mature ones in terms of, and I speak with a lot of founders, by the way, from Egypt, and I see the maturity of the founders there because, in my opinion, correct me, and here I'm taking your opinion, Khaled, because what I've seen in the Egyptian entrepreneurs, something which is good, which I hope like others will do it. They think globally from day one.
Yep.
Means they think, okay, how can I take this product? And I don't want only to sell it in Egypt or Saudi or UAE. I want to take this globally. Is this a mindset, in your opinion, that Egyptian entrepreneurs usually they have?
Yes, 100%. I think it's no longer by choice, to be honest. The market in Egypt, while it is a huge one, it's not sustaining enough unless it's pure, consumer play.
Right.
Like all the fintechs that are coming up. But even there, if you're doing anything that has to do with infrastructure, software, even consumer, but sort of, consumer apps and so on, that the business case, the whole business case is built on the fact that you need to kind of export this product, position it on a global scale. You want to, have that global exit, and as well as and on the plus side, you're making use of the local talent, the
Exactly.
cost effectiveness of it. So it's creating a very good story, one that many other countries have succeeded with, like India and others. And so Egyptians are putting that as a target. We can be the next I wouldn't call it outsourcer, but exporter of products global on a global scale. So
Right.
the other thing that I like, that I see, and it is typical of an emerging economy again, is the Egyptian entrepreneurs are hustlers by nature. You need to hustle for your day to day just to get around and get your way around things, and so that gives you a lot of grit and helps you with your own startup. The term hustle is always used in Silicon Valley, but you don't find a lot of it there, except with, again, successful founders or entrepreneurs. And in Egypt, it's just inherent by nature. Again, it's you find a lot of hustlers. They're just waiting for the right opportunity. So it's another skill that has developed by nature and might create a good differentiator there.
Absolutely, yeah. And I can, again, if I want to name, I would not end this episode, but I've met a lot of real hustlers, to your point, that even they go, as founders, although like, if you think about it, the positions they came from, they didn't have even to do it, but, because they have the passion, and which we talked about, and, they go out by themselves, they go to the streets, they talk to customers. I've seen it like, in front of my eyes, like no one told me about it, which is, and the talent there is, it's very decent. I would say I always call Egypt as the It's that basket of talents that feeds all maybe the MENA region when it comes especially to software development, design. Like even, recently I start to see uh, in creativity also as well, which is really good. Now, just one point again, because you've been in the valley yourself, Khalid, about accelerators and incubators. Do you think we need more here in the region? Do we have, because to give, so first, maybe as people who would run the incubators or accelerators, do you think first we need people to encourage this culture of taking risks and failing and actually celebrating that, of course, within the limits, and at the same time giving the know-hows, because I'm seeing people who are trying to do something, but unfortunately the way it's positioned or the way they market it, quote unquote,
Yeah.
it's letting the founder saying, hey, this is not an incubator, this is not an accelerator, this is just a course. And no, sorry, I'm not paying you money to try something. I can go and try with my own money. What's your point on this? And because you've been in
Yeah.
accelerators in the US also.
Yes, and I've been involved heavily with Alchemist Accelerator, which is one of the top enterprise only focused accelerators in San Francisco, and I've been there as a founder, and I also joined in as a volunteer at some point, and I got to learn a lot as a founder, because of even though I was a Stanford grad and I did my MBA, but still the accelerator gave me a lot of sort of practical mentorship and kind of a guide that takes you through that lives with you through the startup journey. It's not a course, as you mentioned. The thing I loved the most, and I urge other accelerators to do, is that they really prolonged the cycle. So with Alchemist, I think they stayed 9 months, and so it doesn't necessarily have to be a daily thing, like a coursework of sort, but it's something that continues with you. And you go in and you try in your MVP, and you come back and you do your customer interviews, and you come back, and you're seeing these challenges with recruiting and building your sales channel and product design and so on. And they're always there with you every step of the way. And so they're kind of living the experience with you, and you're always finding mentors in that sense. The other thing that they're doing, you've hit it right on the nail, is that they're spreading awareness of that failure acceptance, the risk taking that I've mentioned earlier, that we need more of. This is the only way to encourage it, and so having more of these in the region is definitely, there's a big need for it. The only thing is that you need to continue the value chain as well. So as we spread the sort of the long tail with or the bottom of the pyramid, sorry, with the accelerators, you need to provide as well more VCs. And as I mentioned, there is an increasing number, but we need more, because as you come out of accelerators, you're going to need funding and further sort of risk-taking encouragement. Let's put it that way. And then obviously you need more exits. You did mention obviously Souk and Kareem. These are the two that we always use and we always mention. We need more.
Right.
That's definitely that. And one will push the other, and we push. It's a pyramid, right? Let's lay the foundation and see where that takes us, for sure.
Yeah, of course, and of course, I don't claim to be expert in this domain. I have an operator background, but as I said, like I have the passion. So there are like pillars. I think we have some of them now. So we have talents at least. We have some VCs. As you said, we need more, but we need more. It's not like to just copy paste, but again, like it's a proven model. We need, I would say, number one, more early adopters, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, these guys, they're gonna go and sell to someone, right? Like they're
Yeah.
not just building for the sake of building. And I think, the early adopter mentality that, okay, I can buy a product which is, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but accepting that version one, what's meaning of version one? And here in the region, especially in the B2B, I know like rarely we see people who endorse like helping founders, in their validation, thinking like as a design partner rather than just a client and you know company relationship. So we need more of this. And the other thing also, which more collaboration with research centers. Of course, we have. Well, don't get me wrong. We have plenty of good universities in the region, but we need to see like real use cases coming from academia, going to see their ways to the market. So this is just my own 2 cents on this matter. On the VCs, and I would say always I mentioned we need real VCs because it's not like anyone can call themselves a VC. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But VC who thinks in the same way that the Silicon Valley VCs they think, about placing multiple bets, accepting that things might fail also as well. Not someone who's just want the guaranteed returns because there's not such thing. But anyway, I think this discussion can go more and more, Khaled. As we are close to an end, any final thoughts and where people can get in touch?
Obviously, I'm personally always available on. I'm active on LinkedIn, and I'd love to hear. I'd love to connect with others in the region and back in Silicon Valley, and would love to hear more from the audience, and I'd love to hear. I'm an avid follower of the CTO show, so I'd like to thank you one more time. We are talking about spreading awareness, and this is the impact that you are bringing, Mehmet, in sort of spreading that.
Too.
I'd just wanted to thank you one more time, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
The pleasure is mine, Khaled. Of course, I'm gonna put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. The of course DSquares for people who want to learn more also about the company, so you can find that in the show notes. Again, Khaled, I know as chief operating officer how busy things can get. So your task of the day-to-day activities of the company. So you took 1 hour of your time to spend it with me and share your knowledge with my audience. I appreciate that. So this is how I end my episodes. And I'm gonna end with what you said, Khaled. So what I'm trying to do is, on a small scale, very humble effort to give back, bringing voices similar to Khaled to the podcast, just to spread awareness, try to inspire someone to start something new. Maybe you're stuck somewhere today and maybe you listen to Khaled and you say, hey, I learned something from Khaled. Let me try and try to do something. Let me, for example, the big take for me today from the episode, Khaled, is about, accepting that, risks exist and failure might happen. So let's embrace it and let's try to do it again. Don't be afraid of what people will think about me. In my opinion, this is the biggest thing. And this is how I and all my episodes. This is for the audience. If you are someone who just discovered the CTO show, thank you for passing by. I really appreciate that. I'm repeating myself. We're trying to spread awareness. So it really helps if you can subscribe, share, and tell people about the show, not because of me, just to spread the knowledge. And if you are one of the people who keeps coming again and again, thank you very much for doing so. I appreciate your messages. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate, everything you do for the show, especially during 2025, as we are very close now to 2026. I'm happy to share that, almost from Feb this year, the podcast was always in one of the countries trending in the top 200 Apple podcast charts. Of course, it keeps changing countries across, but some countries, they stayed longer. Egypt was one of them, by the way, Khaled. And I'm happy for that. But I'm still waiting for my friends in the US. I need a push from you because I think I'm not doing very well there. So I need maybe some help from my American friends. We did it in Canada. We did it in the UK. We did it in Spain, Australia, here in Saudi, UAE, Egypt, and a lot of African countries also as well. So I appreciate if you can do this small push. And as I say always, stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.